Hi everyone, Kelly here, and today is the 10th day of Bookmas, and I've been filming all my Bookmas videos by my tree, so I thought I'd give you a little view of the rest of my Christmas decor that I have on my mantle. So today actually starts kind of my favorites of the year. So today I'm going to talk about my 10 favorite audiobooks that I listened to in 2019. Tomorrow will be my least favorite books of the year, and then 2 days from now will be my favorite books of the year. So in order to not be repetitive, because I read so many books, any books I mentioned today in my audiobook will not be part of my favorite books of the year. So some of these were books that I really loved and would be kind of in my top 10, but because I'm talking about them today, I wanted to be able to look at more books that I really loved. And also the thing with audiobooks is that a book that might have only gotten a 3 or 4 star based on its content, if I absolutely love the production of the audiobook, sometimes that bumps it up for me. So I don't know how I would rate these books if I had just physically read them, but I love them as audiobooks. Really enjoy the narrators, everything. I'm going to put in the description all the names of the narrators. So if you are looking for a specific audiobook, you know who to look for, and I will tell you the names as well. And some of them are my favorite audiobook narrators that I listen to quite a bit. So let's get started. These are not in any order in terms of favorite or anything like that, because I didn't feel like I could put them in an order because I love them all. So first I want to start off with 2 books that are actually narrated by the author, so they don't have professional narrators. And the first one I want to talk about is With the Fire on High, which is written and narrated by Elizabeth Acevedo. And this is a book that just came out in 2019. It is a YA contemporary about a teenage girl who has a young daughter, and kind of her story of how she is trying to still follow her dreams and figure out what she wants to do after high school with her life while still being a young mom, and kind of balancing those parts of her life and all that. And I really enjoyed the narration in this book. I thought the author was an excellent narrator. What was great was that she had I don't know, just the way she talked about the food and about the culture. There's a lot about her, part of her, the character's heritage is Puerto Rican, and just the way she talked about those things just felt really genuine coming from the author. So I really enjoyed this one. It made me want to go and pick up her other book, Poet X, which is also narrated by her, and I'll definitely be reading that in January. I've actually already downloaded it onto my phone, so it might be one of the first audiobooks I listen to in January. So I'm really excited to listen to more from this author. I hope that she continues to narrate all of her books. And the next one is Becoming by Michelle Obama, and a lot of memoirs, the person narrates their own, and sometimes that's really great because they're good at narrating it. And I thought that Michelle Obama did a great job narrating hers. I just loved hearing her voice and telling all about her life. So there's not much to say about this book. I've already reviewed it kind of recently. I mean, it's basically her talking about growing up in a poorer community and then working really hard and getting into an Ivy League school, and then her meeting Barack, and then them going through the whole process of him becoming a politician and becoming the president, and what it was like being the first lady and all that stuff. So I thought it was well worth the read. I really enjoyed it. I loved her narration. Next, I want to talk about 2 books that are narrated by a full cast. So a lot of times you might only have 1 or 2 narrators in a book, but then every once in a while you get a book that is every character has a different narrator, or there are just several narrators involved, and those can be real gems when you hear them, because it almost is like listening to a radio show or something like that. I really enjoy a well done full cast narration, and one of the ones that I loved this year was Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I'm not going to list all of the narrators for these full cast ones, but if you Google it online, you can see all the narrators, because some of them are people that you probably would have heard of, actors and stuff like that. And I just thought this is one of those books, like I said at the beginning, where a book can be made or broken by the audiobook. And that one is this, that I don't think that if I had read this book in physical form, I would have enjoyed it as much as I did listening to it. And that's because of its format. If you've heard about it before, this is about a fictional band, and the whole book is in interview format. So you can just see each narrator has like a different person in the band, and the people that, you know, family members, stuff like that they're being interviewed. And so you can kind of tell the difference in their voices and tell who's talking and all that stuff. And I think it really added to the whole effect. Hearing the interview, it felt like more like a podcast, and I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. It's kind of a shorter read too, so I would highly recommend listening to this one if you haven't already. And then the other full cast narration that I really enjoyed was The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society by Marianne Shaffer and Annie Barrows. This was started by one author, the mother, and then when she passed away, her daughter finished the book for her. And this book is completely written in letters, and I think that's why the full cast narration really helps. And this takes place right after World War II and kind of a island community, you know, dealing with the aftermath of being, they were, what's that called? Occupied. So they had been occupied by the Germans during the war, and what it was like to kind of rebuild after the occupation. And then there's a author from the mainland that comes out to interview them and get to know them. And she starts like a letter relationship with them before she goes to visit the island. And so that's where the letters kind of come in. And each letter is narrated by a different person. So like, I don't know if every single person has a different narrator, but there's a full cast narration. And so you can kind of tell who is writing the letter by their voice and all that stuff. And so I think it really helped with the like letter writing. I don't know if I'd read it without, if it would have felt as immersive having different narrators for the letters and stuff like that. And then I watched the movie right after, and watching the movie with the book was just like the perfect combination. So I would definitely recommend this one and then watch the movie afterwards. One author's books that I have really enjoyed listening to in 2019 was Roald Dahl. I think that I have listened to 3 of his books in 2019, and the one that I loved the most was The BFG, and this was narrated by David Walliams. And all of them have excellent narrators. I listened to James and the Giant Peach, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and Matilda. So 4 of his books. All of them had great narrators, but this one was my favorite. For some reason, this narrator like really captured the giant and his persona, and I really loved it. This is all about a giant who befriends a little girl and kind of their relationship and what the hijinks and things that they get up to in the book, and it was just so fun. These are great to listen to with kids if you have kids. I listened to this with my 4-year-old in the car, and she just loved the weird words that the giant had made up and stuff like that, and it was just a really joy to listen to this one. So I would highly recommend any of his audiobooks. Next, I want to talk about The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins, and this one was narrated by Glen, McCready, and Rachel Bavidge, and I thought they did an amazing job. There's so many, since this is a classic and it was written so long ago, there are a ton of audiobook versions of this. So if you want to listen to it, I would highly recommend finding this exact version with those narrators. Like I said, they'll be down below so you can find this one. I believe the production company was called Naxos. So look for this one because they did an awesome job. It was just so much fun listening to this book. This is a Victorian Gothic novel that involves a man who is a drawing tutor for these 2 women in the country, and just a lot of stuff is going on with the family and this woman in white that he runs into right before he takes this job. And it's kind of a mystery, but like also has some really ridiculous things in it. I loved it, and listening to it was a real joy. So I would highly recommend listening to it. But even if you aren't good at audiobooks, still read the book. It was such a good book. Next, I want to talk about Pet Sematary by Stephen King. And this one is narrated by Michael C. Hall, who plays Dexter in the show. I've never seen Dexter, but other people sound excited when I tell them that it's Dexter that narrates it. And this was the first Stephen King that I have enjoyed in a long time. I had read several of his books physically, over the last 5 years. All of them were like 2-star books. I just really didn't enjoy them. And I was like, man, I really need to like try one of his more popular books. Pet Sematary is one of the ones that a lot of people recommend to read if you want a really good Stephen King book. And so I thought, well, I've read those ones physically. Maybe I should try the audiobook. So now I'm kind of trying more of his books through audiobook, and I just loved the audiobook narration of this book. And I'm sure you've probably heard of Pet Sematary, where this family moves to this town and there's a pet cemetery back behind their house, and just stuff happens revolving around that. It is horror, but I would not say, I'm a baby when it comes to horror. I don't do well with horror, and there isn't too much horror in this book, actually. Like, the very end is horror, and even that wasn't enough to really scare me. There was only a couple parts that were like slightly scary to me, but for the most part, it's really about grief and how people handle grief. And I just loved the way Michael C. Hall narrated some of the characters. Stephen King is known for his character work, and this book has such amazing characters. Like, some of them you really hate, but that's part of it. They all evoke some kind of emotion, and one of the characters is this family. I can't remember what the family's name is, but they have a neighbor across the street that's an older gentleman who has lived there his entire life, and I could just sit and listen to an entire book of him, that character, just telling stories, because anytime he was telling the main character a story, I just loved that part. And the way Michael C. Hall like narrates that character, I just like fell in love with Judd's character and really enjoyed it, and it helped me like really get into the story at the beginning and love it. And then, you know, King pulled me in the rest of the way with how his story progressed. But like Judd from the very beginning, I just loved him. So I would definitely recommend listening to the audiobook for that one. Next, if you're looking for something nonfiction and something short, I would recommend either of the books that Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie wrote that were feminist books. One is called Dear Ijeawele, or A Feminist Manifesto and 15 Suggestions, or We Should All Be Feminist. Both of them are only like an hour, maybe less, of the audiobook, so I actually listened to both in a row. They were really good. We Should All Be Feminist is narrated by the author, and because it's based on her TED Talk, and that one is really good. And then I really love Dear Ijeawele, and that was narrated by January LaVoy, who she narrates The Diviners. I hear a lot of people talking about how great she does narrating that, so that made me really want to listen to her do that, because I thought she did a great job on this. I've actually listened to her in another book, which I hated the book, so I'm not gonna mention it here. It'll come in my least favorite books of the year, but not because of her narration. I really hated that book, but her narration was probably one of the only things I liked about that book, and is making me want to pick up The Diviners soon through audiobook just to hear her narrate more. But anyways, back to the nonfiction. I thought these were really great books that just kind of have a basis in feminism, and I like how she kind of gives perspective of both how feminism can be approached in America and then also in Nigeria, where her background is. And I just thought they were excellent, and they're really short, so if you are more on the nonfiction side, those would be good suggestions. Next, if we're talking about shorter books, I have a novella, which is Binti by Nnedi Okorafor, and this is narrated by Robin Miles. She narrates all three of the books in that trilogy, but Binti, the first book, was the only one I really loved. I thought the series kind of went down as it went, but even if you didn't want to get into a whole series, the first book, Binti, can be read as a standalone, in my opinion. Like, it doesn't end on a cliffhanger that you would have to like continue. And I thought it was a really great story. It's a sci-fi story about a young woman named Binti, who is the first person from her community who has the opportunity to go to a school that's in space. And this book is basically her journey from Earth to this other planet and her time on the spaceship. And Robin Miles was just such a good narrator. She really drew me into the story. It's pretty short, so it'd be a quick one to pick up. And I loved her so much, the narrator, that I chose to listen to The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, because I knew she was one of the narrators. And so I would just pretty much pick up anything she narrates, because I just enjoyed her narration a lot. And the last one, I did save this one for last because this is narrated by one of my favorite audiobook narrators, and that was Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton, and it's narrated by Scott Brick. I think if you looked at like all the narrators that I have listened to in 2019, I have listened to more books narrated by Scott Brick than anybody else, because Jurassic Park, I listened to the sequel, The Lost World, narrated by him. Two of the books written by John Krakauer, I read Into the Wild and Where Men Win Glory, which were also narrated by Scott Brick. And then two Eric Larson books, Dead Awake and Devil in a White City are both narrated by Scott Brick. So that's how it means that. That's 6 books that I have listened to by this narrator. So obviously I really love him. But out of all of those, the one that I liked the most was Jurassic Park. I just love this book. This is a reread for me from my childhood. And I mean, it's dinosaurs, it's Jurassic Park. It's a lot of fun. Michael Crichton's books, I have always only listened to them. In high school and in college, I listened to a lot of his books, and then I decided to go back to it this last year because I just really enjoy his as audiobooks. I think it's because they're very sciencey and action-packed. So the audiobook helps me get past some of the science stuff that might like trip me up, but then the action like keeps it going. So I really enjoy it. So I would highly recommend Michael Crichton books on audiobook, and I would recommend anything narrated by Scott Brick. I just love him. So those are my favorite audiobooks of the year. Some recommendations if you were looking for audiobook narrators that are really good. Hopefully you'll get something from this. There's something from almost every genre in this list. So whether you like nonfiction or young children's books or horror, sci-fi, there was something for everybody. So hopefully you will find one that you enjoy. And I hope you're enjoying the new year. Bye.